Hello everyone, today we are going to be making a cork daffodil. This project involves gluing and a little bit of hand sewing. You will need your pieces cut. These pieces are for the large daffodil. This one here is the small one. So once we get this one made, you can see the size difference. There is no difference in the construction, just a difference in the size of the pieces. So you will need 2 leaf pieces. They're going to be mirrors of each other. You're going to have 2 center petals. One of your center petals will be slightly smaller, just slightly smaller than the other, and they are also going to be mirrors of each other. And then you're going to have 4 base petals, which are going to be these petals down here. You will have 2 petals and then 2 petals that mirror the other ones. You will also need a cork cord, some embroidery thread with a needle, some fabric glue. I like Fabric Tack by Beacon. It is my favorite type to use on my cork. You'll also need a seam ripper or some small snips and just a pair of scissors. All right, let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to do is to glue all of our cork pieces together. For your base petals, you're going to have 2 base petals and then 2 mirrored base petals. For these, you're going to take 1 base petal and 1 base petal reversed, and then the other base petal and the reverse. And these are what you're going to glue together. So you just want to make sure that you have the right petals together so that they line up, because they are not symmetrical in each petal. There's slight differences in each of the 3 petals. So you're just going to put your glue down, make sure you get all the way to the sides so it doesn't curl or separate on you as you're going. You're going to match up your petals. There is one petal that is slightly fatter than the others. I usually use that as my guide as to where I need to go. Make sure all your edges line up. And press them together. Now, all of my pieces are cut with my laser. If you're cutting by hand, it might be easiest to cut one and glue it onto a larger square of cork, and then you can use this as a guide to cut to make sure your edges get even. Also, for the center holes, you can just use a leather punch to punch a hole in the centers. For these little holes around here, these holes are going to be used for your threading and making your center of your daffodil. I just go ahead and put the holes in there to make it a little easier to go through. If you're not using a cutting machine or a laser to cut your pieces, I would suggest on the template that's in the pattern to just use a stiletto and just kind of poke holes through your cork, and that will help you when you're sewing later for your needle to go through. All right, so we're going to continue to glue our pieces together, and just make sure you line up your edges so they're nice and straight. For your center petals, you're going to have to kind of turn your petal until the pieces line up. I actually got it first try here, but you might have to turn until your holes match. And as you can see, it's just slightly bigger on this outer petal. That is so that when we fold it up to make the center, our inner one doesn't hang over our outer one. So get all these pieces glued together, and we will move on to our hand sewing. Okay, so actually before we move on to our hand sewing, we're going to get the stem set. So if you're using a cork cord, you will notice that you have this stitching down one side of the cord. Okay, we're going to take some of this stitching out. So you're going to go down about 1/2 inch. And the easiest thing to do is use a seam ripper and just grab those threads, and just go ahead and cut them with your seam ripper. If you don't have a seam ripper that you're using, you can use just little snips to cut the area. And you want to go down about 1/2 inch. Once you have your cord open, you're going to see the rope cording underneath, and we're just going to clip that off. Be careful not to cut your actual cork fabric while you do that. So you're going to need your glue again, and on that piece of cork that you have opened up here, just go ahead and add some glue. And then fold it over so that you have just this little bump at the top. This is going to go through the center of your flower, and this little bump will just kind of hold your stem in place. All right, so go ahead and set that to the side. We're going to move on to our hand sewing now. Make sure your glue is dried. If you're using the beacon glue, the fabric tack, it dries very quickly. If you're using a different type of glue that needs a little more time, go ahead and just give it this time to set. Take your embroidery floss. You can tie a little knot here, but we're going to actually tie another one. So pick one set of holes. You'll notice that these are kind of grouped together in twos. So just pick one of them. From what's going to be the inside of your center petals, pull your thread through, and then go back through here. And this is actually where I like to tie the thread. Let me zoom in just a little bit for you here. So I just tie a knot here. Well, if my fingers would work. Okay. And then I just kind of clip that excess tail off. Okay. Now that you have that secured, you're going to just go around, in and out of those sets of holes. At this point, you don't need to pull anything tight to start bending. We just want to get around the entirety of the petal back to the beginning where we started. Okay, once you get back to that set where you tied your knot, go ahead and go through that set one more time to connect everything. Now, we're going to just start pulling our thread. If you want to start kind of pressing that middle down, pulling our thread so our center of our flower starts tightening and bending in. So you see how it's starting to fold in. All right. I like to have these folds here pretty tight, and then this last section I leave just a little loose so I can get my hand in there. So go ahead and hold your folds pretty tight. You're going to take your needle and loop it underneath a section there of your thread and just tie a knot to secure everything. And then clip that. Not too close to the knot because you don't want it to come undone, but short enough that it's not overhanging. I'm using too big of scissors here. But once you get that tied, go back and just kind of pull your center apart just a little to make it evenly rippled, I guess is the best term for that. Okay. I like to press down here in this middle to kind of form a little bell shape. And that's your center petal. Okay, now that you have that, you're going to zoom back out so you can see the rest of it. Take your base petals, grab that glue again, and just put a little bit of glue around that center circle of one set of your base petals. And then you're going to offset so you have a nice star shape, making sure to line up those center holes. So now you have this star shape in your base petal. Take your stem, the end that you didn't glue, slide that through the hole of your center petal. You'll see that that stops right there from where we folded everything over. Then you're going to slide it through the holes of your base petals. And there is the top of your daffodil. Let's move on to getting our leaf on. To add the leaf to the petal, we're going to sew the leaf on with a few stitches to wrap it around the stem. My cork cord tends to curve, usually, just a little bit. So I like to look at where that curve is, and I usually place my leaf so that the flower will curve away from the leaf. Go up about ½ an inch or so and just wrap your leaf around your stem. Actually, before that, you should probably prep your thread. This time you do want to tie a knot. You want to make sure you do a couple knots here at the end so it doesn't slide through. There are two ways that you can secure your thread. You can just come into your leaf and just onto one side. If you want slightly more secure, I like to come up through the bottom of my stem and then just poke through at about that ½ inch or so up from the bottom. And then just pull your thread And then whatever's left here at the bottom from your tail, you can just clip off. Okay. Again, put your leaf where you want it. And just wrap it around. You're just going to hold that. And we're just going to do a stitch from one side across to the other. I like to start at the top. That way when I'm ending, I can slide it back down through the bottom. So come one side or the other, whichever one you want to start with. Come in from the inside, go around to the outside, and back through. So we're just going to stitch straight across. Oop. All right, sorry, I have to pause to get my thread back on. Try not to pull your needle from your thread. All right, so you have that. Again, just go straight across, through one side, out the other. And keep going until you reach the bottom of your leaves. Once you get to the bottom, you are going to tie off. I like to put the last stitch in, and then I just slide underneath that stitch and make a knot. Sorry, that was a little off camera there. And then I take my needle and I go back down through my stem. To hide that end and to make it nice and secure. All right, and there is our daffodil. That's it. That's all we have. That's all you need to do. So this pattern comes with a large daffodil and a small daffodil. You can see the size difference there in the heads, and then just a little bit in the length. They're super simple to make, super quick to make. You can get the pattern on my website. The link is below. I also have kits. Each kit comes with a large and a small daffodil. There are 3 colors to choose from. There is this white and yellow, yellow and yellow, and then there is also a yellow and orange center petals. You can choose to what color you want, or you can choose to mix and match them, and you can get random colors. But each kit will come with one of each size. I hope you enjoyed making these daffodils, and thanks for watching.